Everyone talks about shadow work today. It's become a trend, a buzzword, something people throw into conversations to sound self-aware or spiritual. But Carl Jung never treated it as a trend. For him, the shadow was not some poetic metaphor. It was the dark half of the human soul, the parts of ourselves we've disowned, denied, and buried. And he didn't say, "Go dive into your shadow tomorrow." He warned, "Don't attempt to confront the shadow until you're truly prepared to meet what's inside, because what you find there might break your identity before it liberates your soul." Shadow work is not just healing, it's confrontation. It's the moment you stop running from the things you hate in others, only to realize they live within you. It's looking your envy in the eye and realizing it's not about them, it's about your own unfulfilled self. It's admitting that your kindness was sometimes manipulation, that your silence was sometimes cowardice, that your light has always been haunted by your darkness, and no one tells you how violent that realization can be. So today, I'm not going to tell you how to do shadow work. Not yet. First, I'll tell you what must happen before, the unspoken prerequisites, the foundations you need before you ever step into that sacred and terrifying space. Because if you rush into it without them, you won't heal. You'll fracture. The first step is this. You must develop emotional resilience. That sounds simple, but it's not. It means learning how to hold discomfort without numbing it. It means being able to feel shame and not run, to feel guilt and not collapse, to feel rage and not lose yourself in it. Shadow work brings up every suppressed emotion you've pushed away for years. If you haven't trained your nervous system to stay grounded through emotional turbulence, the shadow will drown you. You'll interpret every emerging truth as a threat. You'll try to fix it quickly, escape it, or worse, rationalize it back into unconsciousness. Before you work with your shadow, you must practice sitting with raw emotion, not interpreting, not spiritualizing, not trying to give it meaning, just feeling it, letting it shake your chest, burn in your stomach, move through your throat, and staying present. Most people can't do this. That's why they project. That's why they cling to distractions or blame others for their pain. Because feeling what's inside requires strength, not surface strength, the kind you perform for the world, but inner strength, the kind you build in silence, by choosing to stay when your whole body wants to run. Jung said that the shadow is 90% pure gold, but what he didn't mean is that it's pretty. He meant that beyond the initial horror, beyond the repressed fears and ugly truths, there is power. But you only access that power if you survive the confrontation without turning back into denial. You don't get to the gold by reading about the shadow or talking about it on social media. You get there by making yourself a vessel that can hold the emotional fire it unleashes. Think about it. If you discovered a hidden room in your house full of mold, rot, and danger, you wouldn't walk in without gloves, a light, and preparation. You'd know it could be toxic. Shadow work is the same. That hidden room is inside you. It's the psychic space that holds your unmet needs, childhood grief, forbidden impulses, secret fears, and unrealized desires. You've sealed it shut for years, and when you open it, things don't come out clean. They erupt. That's why emotional resilience must come first, not for performance, but for survival. You need to know how to self-regulate, how to pause, how to breathe through discomfort, how to observe without immediate reaction. This is not spiritual bypassing, it's discipline. Because only when your nervous system feels safe can your psyche allow the shadow to rise without panic. So before you dive into journaling prompts, guided meditations, or psychedelic journeys, ask yourself this: can I sit in emotional pain without trying to fix it? Can I be with the part of me that feels like a monster, a coward, a fraud, and not run? If the answer is no, that's okay. That's the beginning. That's the real first step. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be willing. Willing to stay, willing to feel, willing to break the habit of escape. Shadow work doesn't begin with depth. It begins with capacity. And once that capacity is there, once you can sit with your own storm without needing someone else to save you, then, and only then, are you ready to begin the descent. Because make no mistake, working with your shadow is a descent, not into evil, but into truth. The kind of truth that burns away every illusion you've used to protect yourself. But if you've built the strength to stay present with what emerges, that truth will become your freedom. Before you descend into the shadow, you must be willing to tell the truth, not to others, to yourself. This brings us to the second essential step, radical self-honesty. Not the surface-level kind of honesty we often perform, where we admit safe flaws, where we confess weaknesses we've already come to terms with. I'm talking about the kind of truth that makes your stomach turn, the kind that shakes your ego, that forces you to admit that maybe you are the one who caused the damage. Maybe the victim mask hides a manipulator. Maybe your need to be seen is so strong that you've unconsciously played roles just to earn love. Maybe what you call morality is actually fear, and what you call kindness is just repressed anger. Carl Jung warned that the greatest danger of the shadow is not that it exists. It's that the ego will do anything to avoid seeing it. The ego isn't evil, it's a defense mechanism. It's the mask you've built to survive in the world. But before you do shadow work, you need to understand this. The ego is clever. It knows how to twist the truth to preserve itself. It will turn your darkness into someone else's fault. It will spiritualize your pain to make it sound enlightened. It will filter your entire inner world through a lens that keeps you safe, even if that safety is a prison. That's why radical honesty is non-negotiable. Because without it, shadow work becomes just another lie. You'll think you're healing, but you're actually just decorating the mask. You'll convince yourself that you've integrated your darkness, when in reality, you've just given it a new name. So how do you practice this kind of honesty? First, you have to want the truth more than you want to feel good. That's not easy. Most people don't want to be awake. They want relief. They don't want self-knowledge. They want self-comfort. But the shadow doesn't care about your comfort. It only responds to your willingness to see what's real. Radical honesty means asking yourself questions and not rushing to answer them. Questions like, what am I pretending not to know? Who am I blaming to avoid responsibility? What story do I keep telling myself that makes me feel safe, but small? What version of me am I protecting, and is it even real? It means sitting in silence long enough for the truth to surface. Not the truth you've rehearsed, but the one that terrifies you. And when it does, you don't fight it. You don't edit it. You don't spiritualize it. You write it down. You look at it. You breathe. You stay. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And he was right. We build lives around distractions. We surround ourselves with noise. We stay in relationships that keep us busy so we don't have to feel. We chase success so we don't have to feel unworthy. We bury our rage beneath niceness. We hide our jealousy beneath praise. But eventually the shadow grows too big to ignore. And when it breaks through, it won't ask for permission. It will erupt, sabotage, destroy, because anything repressed becomes distorted. That's why you must look first, before it looks for you. Without radical honesty, shadow work is just storytelling. Without truth, you're not integrating your darkness, you're intellectualizing it. And Jung would be the first to warn, psychology is not transformation. You can understand your shadow and still be ruled by it. So if you're preparing for shadow work, stop and ask yourself, can I tell myself the truth without flinching? Can I admit that I've been both the victim and the villain in my own story? Can I love the parts of me that disgust me? And not because it sounds noble, not because it's poetic, but because they're part of me. And I can't become whole while cutting pieces of myself away. The shadow is not evil. It's exiled. It's the part of you that wasn't allowed to exist, so it became distorted, angry, hungry. But when you meet it with truth, it starts to soften, to reveal, to trust you. And eventually it stops screaming and starts speaking. That's when real integration begins, not with rituals or journals, but with honesty, raw, relentless, real. So before you begin, remember this. The mirror must be clean. If it's covered with the dust of delusion, projection, and ego, you won't see your shadow. You'll only see a distorted mask. And that mask will protect you from pain, but it will also keep you from freedom. There's one last step before you begin shadow work, and it might be the most important of all. You need a center, a place inside yourself that doesn't fall apart when everything else does. Without it, diving into the unconscious can leave you lost, fragmented, even more confused than when you began. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that to face the shadow, you had to first establish a relationship with the self, the deeper core of your being, the part of you that observes without judgment, that watches your fear without becoming it, that knows who you are even when your identity crumbles. Because make no mistake, shadow work will shake your identity. It will make you question who you've been, why you've made the choices you've made, and what you've built your life upon. And if you don't have something solid to return to, the work becomes dangerous. Not because the shadow is evil, but because the process is dismantling. It pulls apart your illusions, your roles, your defenses. And that can feel like psychological death if you haven't rooted yourself in something deeper than ego. That's why the third step is this. You must develop a connection with your inner self before confronting the shadow. Otherwise, you'll mistake the shadow for the truth. You'll think your fear is your identity, your rage is your essence, your shame is your destiny. But those are just energies moving through the psyche. They are not who you are. So what does it mean to connect with the self? It means creating space every day to be still, to be silent, to listen, not to the voice in your head that narrates, judges, and plans, but the voice underneath, the one that doesn't speak in words, the one that feels like presence, like awareness. Jung believed that the self is not something we create, it's something we uncover. It's already there, buried beneath the noise of the world, the programming of childhood, and the distractions we've used to survive. You build connection to the self through solitude, through reflection, through asking deeper questions and not needing immediate answers, through creating without an audience, through walking alone without feeling lonely, through learning to trust your own intuition more than external validation. This is not easy. In fact, for many people, it's terrifying because the ego thrives on distraction, on roles, on approval, on noise. But the self waits in silence. It cannot be performed. It can only be experienced. And when you begin to feel that presence within you, even for moments, you start to build an anchor, a spiritual home, so that when the storm of shadow work begins, you're not tossed around by every wave of emotion. You can observe your anger without becoming violent. You can feel your shame without collapsing. You can witness your darkness without thinking it defines you. That's the paradox. To face your darkest parts, you must first meet your most grounded one. You must establish a container before pouring the chaos in. You must learn how to hold yourself completely, gently, without fear. Jung didn't believe in rushing into the unconscious. He warned that premature exposure to the shadow without the proper structure could fragment the psyche. That's why he spent years helping his patients strengthen their ego before deepening their descent. Not to reinforce illusion, but to ensure they had something stable to return to after each revelation. Because shadow work is not just about descent, it's about return, integration, wholeness. You're not meant to live in the dark. You're meant to reclaim the pieces you left there and bring them back into the light. So before you begin, ask yourself, do I have a practice that connects me to something deeper than thought? Can I hold presence through discomfort? Can I find stillness even when the mind is screaming? If not, start there. That is the work. Because the goal is not to conquer your shadow. It's to stop being afraid of it, to stop exiling it, to welcome it home from a place inside you that's strong enough, stable enough, loving enough to hold all that you are. The shadow is not a problem, it's a call, and the self is the one who answers. When you build that connection first, shadow work doesn't break you. It rebuilds you, not into someone new, but into someone whole.